Good morning, everybody. It is so good to be with you, to see your faces. Uh, what a joy to watch you all come in and say hi to each other in the chat room. A real blessing to be together on this beautiful Sunday morning. I see that some are joining us from the Golden Gate Bridge, and maybe someone else is near the Northern Lights. Wherever you are, wherever you're logging in from, good to be with you this morning. A couple of announcements as we get started. At the end of the service, as we have been doing every Sunday, we'll give folks time to leave if you need to do that. But if you stay around, we're going to invite you to go into a chat room with about 6 or 7 other people to check in. We want to make sure that folks stay connected, that we're telling people how we're doing and asking for help if we need it. So stay around if you'd like. We'll give you about a minute to leave again, and then you'll have to accept an invitation to go into a chat room. Would love to see you there. Also, if you can avoid, please, using the chat room during the service, except for the time for joys and concerns, then that would help those of us who are leading the service, and I appreciate that very much. Well, let's get started with our invocation this morning. Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a leading 20th century Jewish theologian, once wrote, quote, "6 days a week, we seek to dominate the world. On the 7th day, we try to dominate the self. In this month when our theme is Sabbath, let this be just such a Sabbath for us. Even if only for an hour, let us cease the work of dominating the world and look inward to the spark of the divine in ourselves and outward to see that same spark in our neighbor's eye. In this Sabbath hour, come, let us worship together." Well, today, as we light our chalice, I want to first say a special couple of happy birthdays. So Juan Escobar turns 12 today, and so happy birthday, Juan. And his sister Isabella turned 10 this past Wednesday. So we're so glad that you're with us. Happy birthday. Hope you had a great day, and want to hope you have a great day today. Well, grab those chalices or candles that you have there at home, and as we read our chalice lighting words, let's light our chalices together. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love, which calls us to work for justice.
Welcome everyone to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation and today's virtual service. I'm Noelle Hyman, your worship associate today. We're glad you're here and that we can even see some of your faces. One of my favorite things about our Sunday services these days is to get to see so many of your faces Brady Bunch style. And much like the Brady Bunch, which was a non-traditional blended family in its time, we are a non-traditional blended family of people who don't all share the same beliefs. Instead, we are united by a bond of a few shared values and a covenant to love and support one another. So if you're with us for the first or second time, please know you are welcome, regardless of what you believe, who you love, or what color your skin is. May brings us a new theme for the month. The theme is Sabbath, which you could say is kind of what we've all been having since the shutdown began mid-March. Even Earth has had a bit of a Sabbath and a day of rest from the havoc we normally wreak upon it. The Sabbath was a massive part of my religious upbringing as a Mormon. We took it very seriously as a commandment, with some specific rules and also some areas open to personal interpretation. It was a definite commandment that we were not to work unless we truly had no choice, nor to cause others to work on the Sabbath. And so patronizing stores, restaurants, and movie theaters was not allowed on Sundays. I remember one Mormon prophet expressed his frustration at driving around Utah and seeing stores open on Sundays. He urged members to keep the Sabbath so faithfully that the stores would no longer be staying open. I know he was intellectually aware that a good percentage of Utah citizens are not Mormon, but maybe that was more of an abstract and vague concept to him than something he could really grasp. We were supposed to dedicate the whole day to God, and how we chose to do that after church ended was in some way up to us. There were many Sundays I avoided doing homework. many years that I did that, but then other years I just didn't feel like that was reasonable and couldn't do it. It was commonly understood that you shouldn't go to parties or swim, but some people felt it depended on your mindset. And if you were spending time with family doing it, that it could be viewed as something more tolerable. So on some Sundays, when my husband Izzy and I were raising very young kids, Izzy's family would often have us all get together at one of our homes, often at one of the homes with a pool. And all of us felt okay about having a family swim together with the exception of one family member. That family member also felt strongly that you should stay in your Sunday best attire the entire day. So her family would come to the larger family get-together a little late, and we would all be in the pool, but her kids were still wearing their dresses and their little suits and ties, and they would sit outside the pool watching everybody else in the water. Mormons used to spend a minimum of 3 hours at church every Sunday. And with a lot of members in leadership of some kind, we could often be there for 5 hours because of meetings before and after every week. And we had obligations to make visits to people's homes, to receive visits in our own homes, to plan lessons for the many opportunities that most of us had to teach or to speak. So for a majority, it was a day of rest from worldly cares, but it could still be a tiring and demanding day. Once I left the religion, it was a relief to gain hours of freedom on Sundays that I never had before. But 20 years later, I still value Sundays as my own kind of Sabbath day, a day of rest from regular work, a day to focus even more on the things and the people that I value. It's a high money-making day in my industry, but I've chosen not to schedule regular work on this day. Whether conscious or not, the shutdown has been a kind of Sabbath or sabbatical for many of us. Maybe it's motivated you to communicate more with family, to check in with how they're doing and make sure they're safe. Maybe a particular frustration you had with one of them suddenly seemed unimportant. Maybe your love for them has been magnified. Maybe it has made you realize you don't need to buy the things you're used to buying. Maybe it has helped you to appreciate the outdoors because that's the only place you can visit outside your home right now. Maybe you've learned to move slower. Maybe you've used the time as a chance to study your field of work, expand your knowledge, hone your skills, or create a new one, or take your work in a new direction to accommodate for current and future changes in public life as a result of the novel coronavirus. All of this has been the case for me. It's been a chance to hit the reset button and to realize that what I once thought were necessities are not really needed at all. What have you been learning and gaining during this months-long Sabbath and sabbatical that you can keep with you? Now let's sing together, Gonna Lay Down My Sword and Shield.
Sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I gotta lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war. Shake hands around the world, everywhere I roam, everywhere I roam.
Hi everyone, my name is Haley Wynn and I am the Faith Formation Assistant here at Valley Unitarian Universalist. I will be reading the Thankful Book by Todd Parr today. There are lots of things to be thankful for. Try to remember some of them every day. Oh, I forgot to mention, if all the kids could join me on their screens, I would love to see everybody's faces. And I'll get started. Every day, I try to think about the things I am thankful for. I am thankful for my hair because it makes me unique. I'm thankful for my ears because they let me hear words like I love you. I am thankful for bubble baths because they keep me squeaky clean. I am thankful for underwear because I like to wear it on my head. I am thankful for my friends because they make me smile. And I'm thankful for my pets because they keep me warm. I'm thankful for walks because there are special times for just me and you. Oops. I'm thankful for my hands because they help me give special gifts. And I'm thankful for my feet because they help me run and play. I'm thankful for music because it makes me want to dance. And I'm thankful for colors because they help me paint. I'm thankful for school because I love to learn new things. I'm thankful for holidays because they bring my family together. I'm thankful for hugs because they make me feel good. And I'm thankful for kisses because they make me feel loved. And I also want to send out a little love and gratitude for all my social work students and social workers working extra hard right now during these stressful times. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Haley, and thanks for that special mention of social workers, such important people doing really important things right now. So thank you. Now would be the time in our service, if we were together in person, that we would pass the offering plates. So I want to say a couple things about giving in these confusing and difficult times for many of us. If you have lost your job or you've lost income for some other reason and aren't able to give right now, of course we understand that, and all we ask from you is just to let us know, and let us know also how we can be helpful to you. That's the point of a congregation, and in these times, nothing is more important than helping one another. However, many of us and many of you are able to continue to give, and we're deeply grateful for that. If that's you, you can text your donation to the number on the screen there, or you can mail your check to our physical address. That helps us do things like continue to keep the sanctuary up and going for our neighbors experiencing homelessness who are staying there through the iHelp program right now, and of course paying all the bills that the congregation has. Those haven't gone away. And so thank you if you're able to continue giving. If not, we love you and want to hear from you. As always, thank you for the many forms that your generosity takes. We're going to settle now into a time of centering, a time of prayer, meditation. So I invite you to just get real comfortable where you are and know that there's nowhere else you need to be right now except right here. Let's spend some time centering ourselves, beginning with this song, Winds Be Still.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass, in silence come, peace, grace this time. of eternity. Take a breath. Let this song be a prayer, a meditation, sending peace and love to all. Light shine in, illuminate our inward view, help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true so we may join our songs in new sounds that become full symphonies. Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace grace this time with harmony. Fly, bird of hope, and shine, light of love, ending calm, let all find tranquility.
Please join me in a spirit of prayer. We offer a prayer of gratitude for the beauty of the earth and for the miraculous bounty of life on this planet that is just close enough to the sun, with just the right kind of atmosphere to make all that life possible. What a miracle we live every day. In these days, we're worried about human life in particular. We pray for our undocumented loved ones who are in many ways bearing the brunt of this virus. Not included in government assistance, they're struggling. We pray for these precious people and vow to seek a way to be part of the solution. We pray for those in our congregation and beyond who have lost employment due to COVID-19. May the economic recovery, whenever it begins, be more inclusive than the economy that came before it. We worry, but we also need time to rest from our worry. So I offer this prayer written by my colleague Mark Bellatini, entitled Slower and Slower. Let the difficulties of the week take their Sabbath now, their brief and simple rest. Let the worries of the week lay their heft gently onto the dark earth. Below this carpeted floor, which can bear them with greater ease than any one of us can by ourselves. Let the tangle of feelings, the pull and push of these last 7 days, sit still for a minute, stop writhing in our hearts, and move no more than a Buddha at rest under a tree. Let there be stillness in our hearts for a moment, the balance point between breathing in and breathing out, like the pause of a dancer between the movements in the music. Let the breathing be free and flowing. Let pulses trance a slower rhythm in the wrist. Let the coming silence be like hands pulling back a curtain, revealing the table set with the feast of life which is present here and now, and has been the whole while, present to those who give up living in either the past or the future. May we live now, knowing that even now, the earth itself is a gift. Amen.
Everybody out the door. I'm feeling like I'm falling behind. It's a crazy life. 90 miles an hour, going fast as I can. Tried to push a little harder, try to get the upper hand. So much to do in so little time, it's a crazy life. It's ready, set, go, it's another wild day. When the stress is on the rise in my heart, I feel it say, just breathe, just breathe. Come and rest at your feet and be, just be. Chaos calls, but all you really need is just breathe. Third cup of Joe just to get me through the day. Wanna make the most of time, but I feel it slip away. I wonder if there's something more to this crazy life. Busy, 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 and it's no surprise to see that I only have time for me, me, me. There's gotta be something more to this crazy life. I'm hanging on tight for another wild day. When it starts to fall apart in my heart, I hear it say, just breathe, just breathe. Come and rest at your feet and be, just be. Chaos calls, but all you really need is to take it in and feel your love, the peace of God that overcomes. Just breathe. Let your weary spirit rest, lay down what's good and find what's best. Just breathe, just breathe, just breathe. Come and rest at your feet and be, just be. Chaos calls, but all you really need is just breathe. Just breathe. Just breathe.
Well, thank you to Katie, and thanks to everybody who is helping to put these services together. Our tech team of Brian and Deanne and Blake, and our worship associates and the staff, of course. Everybody's just doing amazing work and really is committed to making these services the best that they can be. So thank you, everybody, for all that you're doing. Well, I want to tell you a story this morning, and it's a story that you probably know pretty well. But one of the most important things that I believe religion does is helps us live and relive stories. And so this is an old story that you'll know. It's the history of Sabbath itself. And give me just a second here. I'm having a technical moment. So this story recounts the history of Sabbath, which is our theme this month. It reminds us that the Jewish Sabbath, which is the root of Sabbath in the Christian tradition as well, was initially a radical, even politically subversive practice that was a reaction to the cruelty and greed of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. It reminds me of this show I watch sometimes called American Greed. It's all about people who are doing okay, most of them, and then they get greedy. They want to scheme the system, and they end up going to jail, or not sometimes. Many of their stories are similar. At first, they get a handful of people to invest in something by giving them $1 million apiece, and they promise astronomical returns on the investment. Then they spread out the payment dates and they pay the various donors with the money from the other donors. In the meantime, they skim off of the original investments. But you can't do that together, of course. The pyramid schemes require more and more investors and more money. So they work night and day to find more cash until someone calls them on, or someone wants all their money right now, and it all comes crashing down around them. These people become so anxious, their plans require so much round-the-clock management that a good number of them say at the end of the show, you know, I was kind of glad it was over. The Egyptian pharaoh was running a pyramid scheme. Columbia Theological Seminary Hebrew Bible scholar Walter Brueggemann writes, Egypt's socioeconomic power was organized like a pyramid, with a workforce producing wealth, all of which flowed up to the power elite and eventually to Pharaoh, who sat atop that pyramid, end quote. He had slaves to build supplies, including the Israelites, who spent their days making bricks and gathering brick-making supplies. He had piles of food, hordes of animals, and entire cities that were built primarily to store the overflow of Egypt's supplies. He was wealthy, but as the very wealthy sometimes are, Pharaoh was anxious. What if it all went away? So he overtaxed the land and the animals and the people in a frenzied effort to get more and more and more. There is no time to rest in an economy like that. One day, as the story goes, God heard the cry of the Israelites, who were ground down by the constant churn of Pharaoh's economic machine, with never a day to rest, and God sent Moses to confront Pharaoh with a simple message: let my people go. Pharaoh's response to Moses shows us that he sees the Israelites as workers, as property, not as fellow human beings. These quotes are all from Pharaoh in Exodus chapter 5. Why are you taking the people away from their work? Get to your labors. You want them to stop working. You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you shall require of them the same quantity of bricks they've made previously. Do not diminish it, for they're lazy. You shall not lessen the daily number of bricks. They need to work more hours, not fewer, he said. Pharaoh sees the demand of freedom as a direct threat to his pyramid economy. Eventually, Pharaoh decides to let his brickmakers, the Israelites, go. You know this part of the story. Maybe you think of Charlton Heston when you think of this part of the story. Pharaoh quickly gets over that momentary lapse and chases the people to the banks of the Red Sea, where, as the myth tells us, God miraculously delivers the Israelites across on dry land and drowns Pharaoh and his army. And there they stand, a people now, not brickmakers, not any longer, not slaves, not on this side of the Red Sea. Now, their primary identity is as a community of human beings, as children of God. That's quite a change in identity. They wander to Mount Sinai, where God begins to work with Moses and the people to shape this community. No longer just cogs in Pharaoh's economy, okay, but how shall we live now? The answer is found in the Ten Commandments. Now, the Ten Commandments aren't often admired in Unitarian Universalist circles. We might prefer the 10 gentle suggestions. But let me invite you to see them not just as another list of rules, but as a revolution, a politically subversive anti-Pharaoh community manifesto. Pharaoh regarded himself as a god, and many of the gods in the Egyptian pantheon were gods who used up people and the earth for their pleasure. So God says in the Ten Commandments, no more people who claim God status, no more greedy gods. You shall have no other gods before me, the Ten Commandments instruct. There are prohibitions against theft and murder and jealousy. But the hinge to it all, and the longest of the commandments, is the fourth commandment. Hear the language of the fourth commandment through the filter of political subversion. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female servant, your livestock, or the foreigner residing in your town. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested on the seventh day. End quote. Here there is instituted a system of rest to counter Pharaoh's system of constant work and the accompanying anxiety. Everyone is included in the Sabbath command, though not everyone is equal in access to economics and a coercive system. In access to rest, this commandment becomes a great equalizer. Brueggemann reminds us, quote, there was no pause from working in Egypt, but now God nullifies that entire system of anxious production. There are limits to how much and how long slaves must produce bricks. There are limits to how much food Pharaoh can store and consume and administer. The limit is set by the weekly work pause that breaks the production cycle. And those who participate in it break the anxiety cycle. They're invited to awareness that life does not consist in frantic production and consumption that reduces everyone else to threat and competitor. And as the work stoppage permits a waning of anxiety, so energy is redeployed to the neighborhood. The odd insistence of the God of Sinai is to counter anxious productivity with committed neighborliness. Neighborliness doesn't produce so much, but it creates an environment of security and respect and dignity that redefines the human project, end quote. The justification for the work stoppage at first is the creation account. That section of Genesis which contains the creation account probably would have been used in worship. Something like this. The priest might have said, and on the first day God separated the light from the dark, and the congregation would have responded, and it was good. It looks like that's probably what it was written for. Brueggemann writes, and after that, after the congregation repeated, at the end of that section, God rested. God did not show up to do more. God absented God's self from the office. God did not come and check on creation in anxiety to be sure it was all working. God has complete confidence in the fruit-bearing, blessing-generating processes of creation that have been instituted. God exhibits no anxiety about the life-giving capacity of creation. God is not a workaholic. God is not a Pharaoh. God does not keep jacking up production schedules. To the contrary, God rests, end quote. There's a cascade of effects because of that. Because God rests, the people rest. All the people, citizen and immigrant, owning class and servant. And because the people rest, the animals rest, and the earth rests. And out of this great rest comes a reconnection with our deepest values and with our neighbors. No stealing, no murdering, no coveting. Those are things that happen when we see one another as competitors, stealing and murdering and coveting. In a community that knows how to rest, a person can lift up their head and look around, have a conversation with a neighbor or friend, work together to solve shared problems, and rehumanize all the people who might serve them in various ways. The Israelites famously wandered for many more years until finally they stood at the edge of the promised land. They would be going from the desert into a land producing everything they needed. Moses seems to have understood that the abundance in this land might well create in the Israelites a tendency no longer to trust God and the earth to provide everything they need. And with that kind of prosperity, maybe they would feel the need to store up food and materials, to have servants make bricks for them, to ward off a future time of scarcity. They might, in fact, become oppressors, demanding more and more of the people who serve them, becoming fearful of immigrants taking Israelite jobs and goods. Prosperity can do that to a nation. They might forget their neighbors and begin again to see them as competitors rather than partners in community. As Brueggemann says, prosperity breeds amnesia. After they've traveled many years, they stand at the border of the promised land of prosperity. There, Moses reminds them not to forget who they are by reciting again the Ten Commandments, but they're a little different here. This time, the justification for Sabbath has changed. At Sinai, remember, the justification for resting every seventh day is the pattern that's set in Genesis. God rested. But at the border of the Promised Land, well, listen to this. A lot of it's the same as before. Remember the Sabbath day, no work for you or your animals or your servants. But the justification is different. Why the day of rest? The answer here is because you were slaves in Egypt, and God brought you out of there. And so don't you ever treat anyone as just a cog in a machine. That's why you rest, to remember never to recreate Pharaoh's pyramid, wealth flowing to the top, crush the workers' economy. As Brueggemann put it, the economy is not a rat race in which people remain exhausted from coercive goals. It is rather a covenantal enterprise for the sake of the whole community, end quote. People not taking advantage of one another to make money, but something we do together. Moses ended up being right. The people did get prosperity amnesia. They did really well in the Promised Land. Things were so good that Solomon, as the story goes, built a temple in which almost everything was either made of gold or overlaid with gold. Clearly, a show of wealth and power. The prophet Amos records that many kept the Sabbath rules, but they forgot the spirit of the Sabbath. He wrote, "They say, when will the new moon be over so that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath so that we may offer wheat for sale? We will make the ephah small and the shekel great, and practice deceit with false balances," end quote. In other words, when will the Sabbath be over so that we can get back to cheating the poor, get back to charging too much for the food that we're selling people? Even in keeping the Sabbath, the values of community and neighborliness were forgotten now and then. The subversive spirit of a day of rest became an empty set of laws to some people. And here we are, most of us either at the bottom or in the middle of a pyramid scheme that mirrors that of Pharaoh in some ways. Until very recently, most of us were working more hours than ever before, even as the gap between the poor and the wealthy is greater than it has been in 200 years. We're part of an economy of acquisition in which it's easy to buy into the notion that life is about accumulating things and working long hours to pay for them. We are in the midst of a work stoppage like almost no other in history, a forced Sabbath. Many of us are worried and scared, and there's nothing good about that. There's nothing good about this pandemic. Still, maybe amidst all this horror, our imaginations will also be sparked to find ways out of our own version of Pharaoh's manipulative scheme. In our time, undocumented immigrants bear much of the brunt of our continual growth economy. They supply us our food all the way up the food chain, from the back-breaking work of picking crops to serving food in restaurants. And America's response has been to deny them services, most recently to deny them a government stimulus check. They're being ground down by the gears of our economy, especially now. But when we are transformed by Sabbath, what becomes possible is real justice. When we no longer see ourselves as commodities, it becomes easier for us to see our neighbors as fully human too. The Sabbath commandment is not just for us. It's not just about taking a nap once a week. It's about the transformation of society, about freeing not just the Sabbath practitioner, but the entire culture and the earth itself from the grip of constant growth and churn and greed. Let us keep the practice of Sabbath rest in our own lives. Then may we see all people as included in the promise of Sabbath. As we're able, let us fight for fair treatment of undocumented immigrants, which might allow them to rest too. Let us treat everyone as a neighbor, not as a competitor. These are the radical commands of the first Sabbath. Perhaps we'll finally learn its lessons. Maybe in the quiet of our rest, we will hear justice calling our names. Amen.
Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do?
invite Noel now to lead us in our chalice extinguishing words as you draw near those chalices.
Guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again.
Now, friends, may life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make its face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace, dear friends, unless, of course, you